Welcome to Coffee in the Kitchen with Mr. Evans. Today's special mug is my House of Cards mug. I picked this up in Washington, D.C. If you don't know, it's a TV show all about corruption in politics. And you'll see why that is the perfect mug for today in a minute. So, today's lesson, we are going to talk about some big ideas in U.S. history. I have certain themes that run throughout my course. I think there are themes that you see throughout history. And if you can learn some of these themes so often, especially if you're going to take that, like the AP test, you can figure out what the answer probably is, because there are patterns. First of those big ideas, those big themes, is oftentimes we see economic problems develop right after a major war. And so last episode we talked about World War I, and this is just going to be the first of many examples in this class of some of the problems that are going to develop after World War I. Think about what we learned about trench warfare, the soldiers in these miserable conditions, so many of them just excited and happy to make it home alive and healthy and in one piece. And in most cases, these guys have been getting a paycheck while they're over there, so they've been, saving their money and they haven't had a lot to spend it on. So oftentimes they come home with a little bit of cash in their pocket. So you've been fighting in the war, you've been gone in these miserable, horrible, awful conditions. What do you want to do when you get home right away?
Yo, Mr. Evans, I know. Party. What's up?
That's right. Guys are looking to have a good time. They're looking to party. And let's face it, a new haircut, some new clothes, maybe even a new automobile, right? They are looking to spend some of that cash and go have a good time. Well, if hundreds of thousands or even millions of soldiers all come home at roughly the same time, and they've all got extra money and they're all looking to spend it, you know what's going to happen. We're going to get inflation. It's going to drive prices up. At the same time, the factories have been focused on making supplies, making material for the war effort. And it's going to take those factories a little while to adjust. If they've been making combat boots, they're going to need a few months to start making men's dress shoes. And so supply is down, demand is up, and so we're going to get high inflation. 1919, 1920, double-digit inflation rates in the United States, right? Well, what else is this going to cause? The workers throughout the war have mostly been keeping their mouths shut and tolerating poor conditions and poor wages. They've been happy to have a job. A lot of people aren't going to do too much complaining when there's a war on. Other people are sacrificing their lives. Certainly, you can sacrifice a few months in a factory, right? But now the war's over. And a lot of workers are at that point where they're kind of like, you know what? It's time I get mines. I kept my mouth shut. I kept my head down low, and I did everything I was asked to do, working this crappy factory job. But now that the war is over and inflation is through the roof, I need a pay raise to keep up. Right? Well, we know that the bosses don't always want to give pay raises. They have their own issues that they're dealing with that are because of the inflation. So the inevitable is going to happen next. We're going to get a bunch of strikes, right? And some of these strikes are going to get pretty violent. Some are more important than others. I say that because there are certain industries that if they go down, they affect huge other sectors of the American economy, right? So remember, we're still talking about 100 years ago. Stop and think for a minute. What sectors might affect other parts of the American economy? Did you pause? Did you think? You in the back, did you do it? Yeah, I didn't think so. So, look, the coal miners, we've seen this happen before in U.S. history, but without coal, the railroads are going to have problems. That shuts down transportation. If transportation shuts down, there's a ripple effect through the whole economy. Plus, many people heat their homes in those days with coal, so you could literally have people freezing to death in the big cities if there's not enough coal for the coal furnaces. So the coal miners' strike, definitely one that scared people that weren't necessarily working in the coal mines, but the ripple down effect. There's a steel mill strike. We know steel is used in construction. It's used in so many other industries. If they can't get their steel and they can't get it on time and they can't get it cheap, we're going to have a ripple down effect. The third one is kind of interesting because the Boston police force decides to go on strike. And this opens up the question, can police officers go on strike? What would happen if all the police officers in your town were to suddenly go on strike? Well, the governor of Massachusetts declared that no, they didn't have the right to go on strike and made a name for himself by playing hardball, saying any of the police officers who went on strike would not get their jobs back and would be replaced. And that has set a pattern in America for the last 100 years. There are certain jobs where you just can't go on strike because of the safety factor of what you might do to everybody else. So we'll see some more examples of that as well as we go through the rest of these videos. Oh, wait, I think I have someone very important with a special announcement.
You, reporters, shut up, sit down, not talking to you, bad questions, fake news, not interested. Very important announcement. Students, listen up. We have just unleashed this new powerful tool, the internet. My best people have been working on this. It's great, it's great. I helped build it, I helped design it. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to help you learn from home. I know, this is amazing. This is America. We can make things happen here. No, sit down, be quiet. Stupid question. Not ready for him, not ready for him, not ready from him. You, tell me how great I am.
Thank you, Mr. President. Oh, man. Oh, this is living right here. So, actually, the president in 1920 and our current president have quite a bit in common. They're both Republicans. Warren G. Harding was from Ohio, and he runs what is sometimes called the Front Porch Campaign. And a big part of Harding's message was the idea of getting things back to normal. And so this is big idea number 2 we see in American politics and U.S. history, right? So oftentimes our country will go through periods where we'll have a lot of change, right? And so the Progressive era was one of those periods. We just got through studying Upton Sinclair and the Muckrakers and the women's suffrage movement and the push to get child labor laws, right? America went through a lot of rapid change, some of it caused by technology, some of it caused by changes in culture, right? And then, of course, World War I led to rapid change in American culture as well as the federal government began taking over all parts of people's lives that previously the federal government never touched, right? So this period leading up to the 1920 election is a period of a lot of change, right? Well, what is Harding saying when he's saying we need to get back to normalcy, right? He's arguing we need to get back to the good old days, right? We need to get back to when things were normal, right? Before all this chaos, before all this change, right? Very similar, I think, to a certain other president's campaign slogan, right? Make America great again. It's right there in the slogan, right? It implies that America needs to go back, right? We need to go back before all these changes happened, right? And I think you could argue under the Obama administration and in that 8-year time frame was another period of a lot of change in America, right? We had lots of states legalizing marijuana. We had the Affordable Health Care Act. We had transgender issues. I mean, these were things, you know, that people weren't on people's radar 15 or 20 years ago, right? And so we had this massive amount of change, right? And so what happens when you have a revolution, which all that word means is a lot of change, right? Well, whenever you have a lot of change, there's a tendency for a counter-revolution. You saw this in world history last year when you studied the French Revolution, right? You get the pendulum swinging in one direction, and then a lot of people go, oh my gosh, I don't like this. This is too much change. I want to go back to normalcy. I want to go back to the way things were before, right? And obviously that's a message that a lot of people wanted to hear because Harding wins the election in 1920. And he wins by a pretty large margin, a handy margin. So another big idea here for the 20th and 21st century is what it means to be a Republican. And the Republican platform hasn't changed a lot when it comes to economics since 1920. The 1920 platform and the 2020 platform are very similar. Ever since Warren G. Harding, Republicans have been preaching low taxes and low spending, right? The idea that taxes were too high, we certainly see taxes go up during World War I a lot, and this argument that the federal government is spending too much money, we need to shrink the federal government, and we need to lower taxes. And of course, that's the same platform nearly every Republican has run on for the last 100 years. So if you get a question on a test and you're not sure, you don't remember this Republican president or congressman and you're not sure, well, you're almost always going to be right if you bet on the fact that they probably were preaching low taxes and low spending. Gets elected president, the economy passes through its inflationary phase, and by the early 1920s, maybe 1921, the economy is starting to take off again, and America's doing really, really well. After all, our factories were not destroyed in World War I. None of the bombings took place on American soil. Our bridges, farms, roads, factories are in much better shape, and America becomes a producer of goods for the whole planet in the 1920s. So there's no war to worry about, and the economy's really good. Harding should have been remembered as a great president. I mean, these are the two things you want as president: a great economy and no major war, and you are probably golden. So how does it all get screwed up for Harding? Well,